So, you've got a new Pantheon Supersonic. But when you get on it, it doesn't quite seem to ride like you thought it would. Don't worry, help is on the way. In this video, you'll learn how to dial in a Supersonic that rides perfectly for you. We'll also talk about the benefits of the Supersonic versus other longboards. Pumping requires a highly active front truck that can quickly turn and a stable rear truck with more traction so you can push off of it without sliding out. We can achieve this by changing our truck angles and our bushings. The Supersonic is a longboard designed for skating long distances as efficiently as possible. It's what we call a hybrid LDP board. LDP stands for long distance pumping, and hybrid means it's made to be really good at both pumping and pushing. The deck has a deep drop that makes it way more comfortable for pushing, and it also makes it more stable, which is nice on a hill, especially when you need a foot brake. Its nose and tails are angled in a way that transforms conventional trucks into pumping machines. And the Supersonic has two wildly different mounts for your rear truck, which give it a versatility and cost effectiveness unseen in other boards. The Supersonic is a super choice for easy cruising and commuting to work, all the way to top tier push racing or week-long adventures. Part 2, truck geometry. With boards set up for pumping, your front truck somewhat determines your speed, while the rear truck determines your window of efficiency. A more efficient setup also affects how fast you can go. Think of your base plate angles as being loosely like the gears on a bike. You can choose many different combinations of different gears, except on an LDP board, the front determines the frequency of your pump and needs to be tuned to the speed that you intend to ride at. And adjusting the rear trades torque for power. The more power and less torque you have, the more focused or limited your pumping speed will become. While a higher degree equates to a more torque and a lower degree helps with a higher top speed, but you'll likely need to push yourself up to your pumping speeds. If you want more leverage on gentle hills, or you hope to use pumping to build your speed, you will want a higher degree base plane angle. First, we need to understand the terms wedging and dewedging. Both these terms are used to describe using an angled block or a wedge to change the angle of your truck. Wedging more specifically is when we angle the base plate to increase steering. It rolls the truck this way and increases how much the truck will turn. Dewedging is where the pivot end of the truck is rotated more towards the ground. Like if this was the rear, this way. That adjusts how much the truck will roll, and it reduces steering. This makes the truck more stable. The Supersonic's unique shape offers a great deal of customizability when you pair it with different base plates and angled risers. The nose is angled upwards or wedged 15 degrees, and the tail has two different mounting options. The rearmost is angled downwards or dewedged 17 degrees, and the other mount right here has a 40-degree wedge, but this 40-degree angle is meant to be paired with a backwards mounted truck to achieve a base plate angle of 0 degrees. So what does this mean exactly? We can use these mounts in combination with different base plates and wedge risers to change how the board rides. Simply add these numbers together and you will get your effective truck angle. For the tail, we subtract either 17 degrees or 40 degrees from our rear truck. These parish trucks have a 50-degree front base plate angle and a 43-degree in the rear. So if I subtract 17 degrees from the 43-degree truck, we end up with a tail of 26 degrees. And on the other end, if we add 15 degrees to the 50-degree base plate in the front, this gives us an effective nose angle of 65 degrees. This is a great setup for medium speed pumping, and it allows for a lot of torque, enough for some riders to be able to pump up some mellow inclines. On the second setup, I have bare 40-degree trucks in the rear and 50 in the front, but you could set it up with 40 degrees in the front and the rear. If I put a 40° in the front, adding the 15 would make it a 55° nose, and putting it on this 40° mount backwards gives me a 0° rear. On a setup like that, I would get no added steering from the rear, but the setup is really stable. It makes for a really fast pumping setup with low torque and high horsepower. It's well suited for racing and high speeds, but it does require the rider push the board to get it up to speed. One warning, if possible, do not use the 50° truck on the 40° rear without dewedging it, as it'll give you -10° baseplate angles and your turning radius will be greatly reduced. But subtle -1 to -3° angles may help prevent slipping out or even further dial in top speeds for advanced riders. On the topic of risers, you can add wedges to tune your base plates further. What I've actually done here is with a 50° plate, I've added a 5° wedge backwards to de-wedge the nose. It makes it a little easier to pump at slower speeds. This will be far more enjoyable for me when I'm riding on public pathways where I can't sustain top speeds. Part 3, bushings. Once you've chosen base plane angles, it's time to move on to your bushing choices. Now don't be fooled by their small size, because bushings are often the most noticeable upgrade you can make for your setup. Bushings are the rubber part that resists your steering leverage. They come in different hardnesses, which is described by its durometer rating. A lower number, the softer the bushing is, and the higher the number is, the harder the bushing is. Most stock bushings on cash trucks will be too soft for a rear truck and too hard for your front truck. So you'll need to pair your bushings hardness for your trucks.
Yeah, that's good. Both wheels are lifting at the same time.
This part can't be ignored. Front bushings may be too stiff to articulate and will lift on the outside front wheel, and the rear may be way too soft, which causes the board to roll in the rear more, and it will worsen the lifting of your front outside wheel. We recommend bushings that are slightly wider than standard barrel bushings. Both the Riptide Cannon bushings and the Seismic Defcon barrels are full 1 inch wide, and they work best with the Paris or Bear trucks that we offer. This fills the entire bushing seat and allows for the truck to turn around the bushing without extra slop. The hanger stays centered, and it results in a more consistent turn, better wheel bite resistance, and an overall better feeling truck. You can also experiment with different shapes, but barrels give the most consistent increase in resistance through your pumping or turn. We recommend starting with barrels, but if you're the experimental type, try other styles over time. I recommend changing only one variable at a time so that you can identify exactly what effect that change has had on your setup. Next, you want to take into account your base plate angles. The higher the angle, the less leverage will be applied to your bushing. So you'll need to choose softer bushings for your front trucks. The lower the base plate angle, the harder your bushings need to be for that truck, as the kingpin is more vertical and your leaning force is more directly transferred into the bushings. It's not uncommon to see a 170-pound rider riding with 95A, even 97A bushings on a 0° rear truck, while the same size rider might have a 77A bushing on a 60° front, or even a softer bushing if they're running a high front end closer to 65 degrees. Typically speaking, we recommend about a 10A split before the front and the rear if you're running your rear truck on the furthest mounted option. A typical setup for a 170-pound rider might be something like an 80 to 81A front and a 90 to 93A rear. Don't be shy about experimenting though. You'll appreciate a greater understanding of your setup and why you're riding what you're riding at any given moment. When choosing different bushings, keep in mind different brands use different formulas, and each formula behaves differently. You've already heard me mention bushing rebound. I'd say for LDP, this is the most important characteristic of any given formula. If you compress a bushing, a higher rebound one will return to its natural shape faster. It's essentially more bouncy. A lower rebound bushing won't bounce back as much, but it can make for holding a nice deep turn For a pumping setup, almost all riders prefer high rebound urethane because you'll be turning back and forth consistently. We choose to offer some of the highest rebound urethane bushings on the market that feature a full 1-inch diameter with the seismic Defcon barrel bushings. Other options you may consider if you're tuning at home are Riptide Cannon bushings and the Orangutan nipple bushings. Proper bushings can really make or break your riding experience with the board. Following our recommendations here will completely change your setup and have you riding the design as it was intended. Part 4, board flex. You want a decent amount of flex, but you don't want your board to be so soft that it makes your ride less stable, as this can cause your board to slip out when going fast. The flex should be lively, yet controllable when under your feet. The flex is also changed when using the different tail mounts. The inner mount provides a stiffer flex, while the rearward mount makes it flex more. A light flex is suitable for lightweight riders under 170 pounds, where a medium flex is ideal for those that are 170 to 200 pounds. While riders all the way up to 210 will prefer medium when they're using this 0-degree mount. And then on the inverse, light riders as low as 160 that primarily use this mount will probably prefer the medium as well. A heavy flex is suitable for larger riders or those that will be riding down hills. It's also 1/3 of an inch wider than our other flex options, so it works well for those with longer feet. Me. Now there's nothing wrong with choosing a board that is stiffer for more technical downhill performance, or a board that is too soft for extra comfort or just for that flexy feel. But your traction may suffer if the board is too soft, and your ride will be harsher, and you won't be able to get as much energy rebound from the flex if you opt for a stiffer board. Now, I've been just fine riding the soft flex around, and I weigh about 180 pounds. And I have used a soft flex with a 25-pound backpack and winter clothing, where my total weight was probably above 210 pounds with all of my equipment. That said, I generally tend to ride the medium flex myself, as I sit usually around the 185 to 190 pound mark. Part 6, big wheels. We typically sell and recommend the wheels that we developed in-house for the Supersonic, but there's no reason why you can't use other wheels too. Just follow these simple guidelines. The lowest possible Supersonic setup will run a wheel between 85 and 92 millimeters with the trucks mounted flat against the deck with no risers. We typically recommend our 92 millimeter Karma wheels, as they offer a very solid mix of both speed and grip, which is needed for aggressive pumping. We recommend this setup on the 50-40 or 50-43 configuration, depending on whether or not you're riding Bear or Paris, respectively. The high front end degree makes for an easy pump, and we would consider this sort of a medium gearing as a stock setup with fairly easy pumping in the 8 to 12 mile an hour range. With the 50-degree front, this setup will be bite-free out of the box, so long as you're riding with a cupped washer in the board side position. Although you can totally run with these big boys hokus with the 0-degree in the rear. Feels great. I love it. It's my favorite. Hopefully that helps. If you have any questions, please feel free to ask in the comments section. We'll be adding any amendments into the description of the video as well, along with links to the Pantheon website and a link to a video on how to pump by Adam Ornelles. Thank you for watching. Now go have fun with your board.